So, I just watched an anime called The Dungeon of Black Company. Now, it's pretty good, but it has a lot of flaws. This is one of the first shows I've watched where I'm not sure if I am 100% going to suggest it to you guys. It's not that it's bad. And I have no idea. It's so new that I can't tell you guys whether there's going to be a sequel, but I wanted to talk to you guys about it. I love talking to you guys about anime, frankly. It's my only outlet, frankly, so hi. Thank you for having me. But the anime called The Dungeon of Black Company is a very, very weird show, so here's a synopsis just so you can kind of be a part of this without having to watch a great deal of episodes. And by it's like 12, it's not too much. The story of the show is that there is a very, very successful NEET, aka a retired businessman that basically wants to retire and not have to do anything, not be a cog in the business world machine, societal machine. But he ended up basically finding a way to make a shit ton of money so that he could retire incredibly early and live his life as a shut-in. That's basically the gist. Now, of course, it is anime. He gets isekai'd. He gets isekai'd into another world, and this world is a classic fantasy world with goblins, orcs, beastmen, humans, and all the like. And dungeons and somewhat heroes and big-ass monsters. But in this show, it's completely different in terms of the optics of the environment. So yes, it's fantasy, and all the things we described exist, but it's heavily business-ified / economy-ified, in a way that essentially has this hierarchy system of like a grunt worker trying to move up the ladder in the classic business sense. So simply put, imagine a fantasy world melded with like a story about business and climbing to the top of business and kind of trying to teach people the shortcomings of certain businesses and the practices of certain businesses, the whole economic growth versus all these other things. And the main character is interesting because the main character isn't really, unlike any show I've ever watched, I feel like he is the most morally blank character ever, which I don't know is good. I almost rather him be evil because it just seems like he kind of, I mean, it makes sense. I think the main character basically, as long as it benefits him, he's willing to do it. And if as long as it benefits the other people around him, aka his team or business, like co-workers, then he'll also do it. And yeah, that's kind of the pretext, but he's not like holier than thou good, he's not holier than thou evil, or anything like that. So the whole pretext of the show, to summarize it, is this guy gets isekai'd into another world, and he's a kind of a well-established, clever businessman and understands how to make money. So in this world that is very unforgiving, that's very like super grunt, shitty worker that's like grinding his body away into dirt for this company that doesn't love them, want to see them succeed, and etc. It's only profit margin. Then you're seeing this guy climb up the ladder, essentially. And this guy finding ways to do that in these kind of weird, hierarchical, shitty system that doesn't really allow for people to gain or improve. And if it is, it kind of crushes the hope of innovation or anything else, or any sort of other vision about how to see something through. And the show kind of has, again, if you've ever read a lot of like businessy books and etc., it has like pretext to things like this guy constantly is dominating because he's consistently innovating. And the company is falling behind because it's not innovating. And the company tries to buy him up, tries to silence him, tries to do a bunch of stuff to kind of break down this person who's actually quite clever, but honestly, not very a kind person per se. And there's a lot of cool things about this show. So essentially, that's the idea. Now, along this person's journey, he ends up finding what is essentially is like a game-breaking bug or whatever in the whole show, which is essentially he finds this dragon thing that turns into, of course, a tiny pint-sized child that has the most power in the entire dungeon, it seems. Just killer strong. He gives her food, and she basically protects him and keeps his ass alive. So already at the cuff, there's really no way the character can die. So there's no like, you're pretty safe. So it takes a lot of the edge off of the series, which can be nice if you're just kind of sitting back watching this person MacGyver things out of nothing. So yeah, that's something that happens pretty soon. And eventually, and this is kind of the pretext of the show, which is I think the point of the black mining company, or whatever it's called, the mining black company, is it's trying to show you different personality traits within business and how the most successful business people have a specific kind of execution or traits or whatever. So anyways, throughout his climbing and getting successful, he goes through goofy fun encounters, but he also starts recruiting people who are very, very different personality traits. Business-specific personality traits. Like, some people are really good about taking orders and don't like to step out of the line, so they're really good about achieving whatever task you condition them to achieve. There's other people who are incredibly good about managing other people. That's also a thing. There's also people who are very, very good or brainwashed to think that all of their blood, sweat, and tears matters to the company, and it's not like this lifeless, profit motivating thing. So you think that there's like a big brother company is my friend and is going to take care of me, when at the end of the day it's meant to take care of itself and keep profiting so that everyone else can in a weird way profit. But oftentimes it's the people at the very top that are the ones profiting the most. So it kind of goes into all of that, and it goes into like the main character seems to be a person who is just water, which again I don't know if is good. We just talked about an anime recently called Combatants Will Be Dispatched, which does a really fun job about playing with morality. And how this main character seems like morally gray, but seems like he would be the person that you would follow. This character does that, and I think has those traits, but he's significantly more like goofy and non-serious, more than 6 in that show. So needless to say, the main character seems like water. Seems like it's hard to place him somewhere, and it's a little too much, I think, at times. So if the pretext of the show is interesting to you, where you're gonna have this company, this like the isekai world where you're isekai and you're climbing up the corporate ladder in very clever, innovative kind of ways, / manipulating others and getting ahead, that turns into a weird going in the future and going back in time and saving the world and eventually seeing everything through. And the one thing I will say that this show does do very well, this show does cover ground, I think too quickly, but does do it. So this is a show that is almost complete. It goes from a character being completely nothing to the absolute, so that if you're interested into a zero to hero anime that's not going to take like 50 seasons for them to cover any ground, this is that show, but I think done too quickly. And we'll get into that in a hot minute. But let's talk about first what the show does really good. I personally love the introduction of these personality traits within business, especially with what I've been learning these last couple of years. It's pretty relevant to me and very, very fun in some ways. But yeah, the idea that some people have a natural proclivity to trust authority and to maybe do that to a good extent, but then also there's an extent where you do that to where you're being manipulated and you're being very bad. And that very much comes out in his very, very kind, what I would determine to be a very good soul lizard man, who's one of his first friends / co-workers that he makes, and he basically finds him and gives him confidence and keeps basically showing him the reality of business, even though some of it might be uncomfortable. Like, in order to get to a place where you can succeed, sometimes you need to work people really, really hard to get to the place where they can finally have a respite to where you can stabilize. It's kind of like the entrepreneurial spirit of like starting off with stuff being really hard, and then eventually things become easy. The only problem is sometimes businesses don't ever go back and like lower the profit that they're going to gain for their employees' benefit and for their benefit, because it'll be sustainable essentially. But instead, they just they say, fuck it, I worked hard, you gotta work harder. And then they end up breaking, or the people end up, leaving. And then companies find ways to gamify that, but that's probably waste resources. Anyways, it's a weird pendulum / balancing act, it seems like, to a lot of that whole businessy things. Anyway, so that's the lizard guy. Very like classic worker, trusts authority pretty much, doubts himself, but all in all is a good-hearted person. And then we have someone who's, I think, far more interesting, but which is the hero. Which the hero is the classic person who worked their ass off, who listened and believed that the company or business that they were working for is completely like a big brother, like a family member, someone who's going to take care of you because you take care of it. And that you're all this family in this organization. When at the end of the day, unless you have it written down that you're not going to get fired on the spot for a slight hiccup, then your job is not safe. If you make the wrong person mad, you can get fired for a silly reason. But anyways, she is the idea of like, okay, well, what happens if you drank the Kool-Aid? And the truth is you can get pretty far if you drink the Kool-Aid. Like, you can get really strong, if you can survive, you can get really strong, you can develop a lot of experience, but unless you start thinking outside the box, you're just going to be the tool that these people have crafted perfectly to use. And that, I think, is the main disruptive kind of thing to the main character. The main character is the most attack something from a different perspective, do something outside the box, do something that is efficient, even if it's a little more, if it's a little scummy, still do something that's efficient, but then also simultaneously gets roped in, I think, and this is the one thing I think they do very well in the show, where they don't really show the character kind of being like, I guess I should change. It doesn't even feel like he ever is in trouble. It doesn't feel like he needs to change. Everything just feels like the guy's static the whole time, which feels a little hollow when it comes to watching a character progress. But theoretically, I think he does change if you look back harder, because he seems to be very much like making fun of like the grunts, but then eventually is a grunt, and then in order to get himself out of a bad situation, he ends up basically turning himself into an ant. And because we're in a dungeon, that's the whole premise of the show, you're going into the dungeon, he convinces these worker ants that they should rebel against this queen ant, and that would have been a really cool premise, but the show kind of just takes the steam out of that, and instead says, well, if you happen to have like a demon god dragon, it'll just make everything like it's pointless. Like you could just use the demon god dragon and then just won. Like that would have been it. So to me, the show, I think it's trying to make a point, and then it says, but it's funnier if this happened. And it's like, is it that much more funny? That like just a random queen gets kicked in the chest? Is that it? Whereas like the point of, oh wait, if you actually like get a bunch of people who are genuinely being mistreated and are providing a shit ton of value to the whole system, then yeah, you can actually rebel and actually like take down this person that thinks they're giving more than they actually are. And then there can be a better allocation of effort and reasonability to what you could potentially be working. Now, yes, I think the show also goes in to what that is on the negative, to where like one person is overestimating their effort and time, essentially, which is also a thing. I think that happens way in the future, where they say, okay, well, what happens if we basically go the other route in business, which is to give everybody like an insane amount of time to relax, and an insane amount of variability in terms of achieving what they're going to do, what you're going to need them to do. And one of the things that seems really true as well is it is relative. So like, what do you call it? Like there's morality is relative, work is relative, all these things. So what that means, at least I think in the show, is if you have like really like a lot of breaks, if you don't have like the previous conditioning of knowing how hard like this person works. So like that's why a lot of people who like work in convenience stores or work at retail fucking love, like they will totally take working in a cubicle that's a little bit more boring, as long as you don't have to deal with people, because people are shitty. So like if your experience is relatively horrible, but if you have a person who's only ever experienced the cubicle, he probably thinks, wait, as long as I get to go out and do something, then it's significantly better. And this happens exponentially when you're in a company or a corporate setting, because it tends to be you're hiring a bunch of new people, because it's easier to teach people who have no preconceived notions of how to execute something, especially when it's a simple task. They don't try to complicate the system, or sometimes they'll improve it, which is rare, but anyways. But again, we're trying to focus on what the show does right, and that is what I think it largely does well as well, is it introduces these ideas that are in business that are kind of boring, but in an anime, funnier, cuter sense. So if you want to have a little more ideas of how business and your job may have functioned or worked, especially when it gets exponentially bigger, this show kind of does that. And also it shows you, like, I think rightfully so, what like the huge value for kind of like innovation slash disruption is what people also call it. But essentially it's like if people are making gas cars, something that can completely disrupt or break the preconceived environment of profit is making electric cars and actually having them be efficient, more efficient than gas. That would fundamentally kind of break the gas market pretty quick. Not immediately, because it of course has investments and has checks and balances, and they may pivot to making electric cars themselves. But that would just be a company doing what they should do, which is pivot, which most companies don't. So that's kind of what the show is also talking about, is if you're able to like jump ahead and innovate, which is what the show talks about. The guy basically, instead of what is it called, like killing monsters and harvesting their like boss material, he essentially makes like a farm, where like a literal farm, like a milk a cow kind of farm. Not like a farming in a dungeon kind of MMO, but it's kind of the same thing, where he like goes up to the dog and like what do you call it, yoinks some, like shaves off one of their horns and then like feeds them some food, and vice versa. So then they just keep, also the mobs regenerate pretty quick, so it's actually more efficient to like take a piece off of them, make them happy, and then like just collect essentially. Than anything else. Also, you can like maintain this, and then the overarching story that kind of is a subliminal thing within the show is that it's actually, and this is hilarious, but it is an ecosystem. It is a balance. It is this magical force where the dungeon is supposed to remain keep in harmony, essentially, keep balanced. It's basically a metaphor for like our economy, and like money and the value of $1 and the value of mana and this currency called Dragonite or Dungeonite or Demonite. That's what it's called, Demonite. So it's this interesting pretext of the show where it's trying to, I think, refer to an economy, and how if you start to really like rip money or keep printing more money, it decreases the value of a thing, especially if it's in high quantity. And ultimately, if your business fundamentally revolves around pulling out a finite resource that may not always be there, it's not exactly, well, it could have a negative effect because you're taking something out that you're not replacing, so that's not good. It's not a balance or an ecosystem. It's kind of just you ripping shit out and using it, and eventually that's going to go away. And what's going to happen when there's a hole essentially not being filled in the system? It's not going to be good. Usually there's collapse or just a lot of problems, but hey, maybe not yours to deal with, all that. But the way, especially towards the tail end of the show, the person, and again, they don't really do a great job, I think, about explaining this to the viewers. Again, all the shows we're watching right now are very subconscious, like passive things in the background where if you want to think about it, you can kind of make sense of it, but if not, it's not explained to you at all. If the whole show, in a way, is about business, levels to business, etc., and they constantly refer to this dungeon, which essentially is our economy, and how that there are certain, like, dragons / arbingers that are supposed to keep the dungeon safe, and keep it in balance, kind of like people who, manage our economy to some extent. And when those people go complacent, like the dragon, the whole system starts to fall apart to some extent, and it has destabilization. But the show, and at the end at least, he ends up making like an ecosystem, essentially. Something that like the little fish eats the big fish, the big fish essentially moderates the bigger, second little fish, and little fish eat the plants that constantly grow because the sun is still bright, and there's water continually in the ecosystem. So it's a system that actually like fundamentally works within itself rather than eating itself, eventually having nothing left. So it's a balanced profit margin, essentially, to where you're not taking too much to where you'll basically burn the root dry. But you're actually making it so that you can both kind of thrive. You're gaining something, the system is gaining something, and that's hopefully good business. And yeah, the show definitely talks about also disruption and thinking outside the box, attacking something from a different angle. All that stuff is interesting to me. I think that's the show's good point. It doesn't explain things well, though. And now to get on to the things I didn't like as much, essentially, man, oh man, the main character I feel kind of empty. Empty about. I don't feel like, oh my God, he's so great. I don't feel like he's the worst. I kind of just feel like he is, in a way, a self-gratifying businessman, which maybe is what everyone should kind of be in the business realm. Otherwise, you're going to get taken advantage of, which kind of is shown in the thing. Also, it also shows that there is values to you, like using you to your most benefit. If that makes any sense. So, like, the main character is very good about like innovating, thinking outside the box. He's lazy though, and he's impulsive a lot of the time. So he'll make an impulsive decision. But with that being said, though, that's not the worst person to have as a boss. Especially considering as long as they're more innovative than they are impulsive, they can kind of balance out in a really good way. And the people who are the bosses, for those guys who do not know, this is a great way to think about, I think, everything. It's like, in order to be a good boss, you need to be a good employee. In order to be a good employee, you need to be a good boss, or you need to understand what it means to be the both. And the easy way to think of it is a boss produces work. Sometimes a good boss usually does that. Sometimes you just got a manager that is technically the boss that just manages over you and makes sure you do the task, which is kind of the same thing, but the boss at the very top is producing work and the boss under him is making sure you do that said work. But a real boss is the person who goes out and finds work that needs to be done that can be paid for profit. And then an employee does that work. Now one is kind of harder and easier because you literally just do the work, and that's pretty chill. Both jobs can be harder or easier than each other at given times, I think. Frankly, I think the one that comes to like producing work actually being pretty hard. Now, the unfortunate news is that most bosses, especially in our weird systematical hierarchical system, don't actually produce work anymore. They just do what the boss at the very top is telling them to do, etc. But I don't feel like it actually executes on a lot of its ideas really well. Like, again, it doesn't take moments to show that the character is learning, like, okay, maybe there's a value for this guy who's actually, like, he's not as optimistic or as innovative as me, but he keeps me on the right track. He's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. I'm talking about his lizard friend. And maybe this hero, he's like, okay, wait, this person has, like, because of her experience of trusting a person that maybe pushed her to the nth degree and took advantage of her potential and her perception of how things should be done. She has a shit ton of experience and is tough as shit and is smart as shit because of that. Okay, well, I could use that. So it doesn't mention any of that. It kind of just says, like, this is my team and we've come together, but we're not going to really mention that, but we have. And yeah, but single-handedly, I was really enjoying the show, especially from the beginning, all the way up to, I think, episode 5 or 6. Maybe it was 7 or 8. It happens quick. But the moment this is a show that, like, is making really good ground, and it feels super satisfying because you're seeing him, like, innovate, get money, acquire power, like acquire like 1,000 ants to work for him, and you're like, holy shit, like this guy was a grunt, decided to like make the right kind of friends that maybe can't do as much as these other people, but still are very, very hardworking and good. It's kind of an analogy for like getting third world help, essentially, etc., which is weird, but I guess. Anyways, that gives him access to make a bunch of things, farm out demonite at a greater extent, and just gamify the system, essentially. So those are awesome. That feels super good in the series. But then when you get to the point where he gets teleported into the future, and that's where stuff to me completely feels horrible. I'm like, oh my god, I'm enjoying this, and then it just hits a wall because you're like, what's happening? Okay, now we're in the future. Like, I feel like I just jumped to like the 60th issue of a manga that I was at issue like 2 or something, you know? Like, I mean, this should be like, we haven't even really developed these things through, and now we're adding a whole different like scheme to it. Anyways, if you guys, again, the whole show basically is him trying to climb up the corporate ladder. He gets teleported into the future by a previous demon warden that exists within the, not demon, it's like a warden that exists within the dungeon that kind of moderates power. And essentially, long story short, it's just like the economy collapsed, essentially. Like with one of the people missing, with all these catastrophes happening, the economy wasn't able to rebound, and it just broke. So the whole system went to shit, and this one person attained so much power, and used it in a way that made it so that the whole system couldn't feed. So the system itself fell apart. But this person, got out with a lot of stuff. It's kind of like a collapsing economy, but you keep your business. Your business is like still safe and good. Anyways, so then he ends up getting this proposition of like, leave behind your old life on Earth and not go back, or save this future fantasy world, and he chooses it. And I guess the reason why that is weird to me is because it doesn't really equate. Like, at no point in the show was I like, he's learning, he's really changing, he's really understanding the value of the little guy. It does, like, I mean, he does that, I guess, but they don't ever show you like him sit there and be like, yeah, look at that. So I'm a little lost. So when he makes a choice, I'm like, I like that you made that choice, but I don't think it's like you to make it. So I'm like, all right, weird, but sure. Anyways, the show gets better and worse, because it's really, really cool that we see progression happen. Again, all too many times when a show is trying to persuade an idea, it takes its sweet ass time. Sometimes too much time. Sometimes we're like, okay, I just want them to make any ground. It feels so bad when you take 2 steps forward, and you're like, oh my god, we're doing it, and then you get propelled 5 steps back, and you're just like, I'm just wasting time here. Like, come on, like, keep moving forward. And they do that, but in a weird way where there's still that yo-yoing kind of thing happening, but you're slowly moving up the corporate ladder, but then just out of nowhere, like, you become the fucking next big Pooba out of nowhere, like, just super huge. And then finally you start seeing how broken he was from the start because he has the dragon person who's literally a god. So you're like, why would you not just use the dragon person to just ruin the people at the top? Like, it makes the dragon person really throws off the whole system of execution on this whole shebang. Anyways, the good news is that it's fun a lot of the time. So it's fun, albeit a little bit like jarring. It's fun being like, oh cool, now he has a weapon. Oh cool, it's from a futuristic society where this weapon is like a clingy girlfriend type situation. Or yeah, cute, fun, weird, sure. I guess we're really moving fast. Okay, I can't even. Okay, no, that's gone. All right, well, no, now it's gone too. Okay, here we go. We're trucking along, and then eventually they get to the point where he, like, in like an episode, goes into the dungeon, gets a very powerful relic, and is so strong that the world can't deny him now. So he goes through like this whole grunt period of like innovating, getting the right people on his side, profiting. And then maybe it's an analogy for like finding one good innovation and using that to the utmost, like maybe getting an investment in your company. That's what that could be, because at the end of the day, yes, he's like an all-powerful god. He also is in a power. He was that from the beginning. He had the dragon girl from the beginning who loved him to bits, like was willing to die for him as long as he fed her. So like it's a weird sense, but so I guess maybe it's an analogy for like getting an investment in your company that doesn't have any strings attached really. Can propel you into an industry if you have an innovative technology that kind of disrupts the entire ecosystem, but instead of you just saying, yeah, fuck the old way of doing things, you instead make something that is harmonizes so that the ecosystem itself doesn't just collapse. Instead, the outer parts of the old ecosystem atrophy while the new ones flourish and replace the old parts over time, maybe. I may be looking too much into this. But anyways, point being is it's a very, very fun show. But it does, I think, move far too quickly. And I don't know if it's a show that's going to have a season 2 because of how quickly it moves. I think there is something that could happen in terms of this show having a season 2 where the character like just maybe goes to like another part of the planet and like tries to build up a business there too. And that's his whole thing, is just building up businesses while like leaving one or two of the friends or people that he makes along the way behind to run said business. I hope he doesn't lose all of his gang. I think that would be shitty. I think if he left the lizard guy to yeah, he does. He leaves the lizard guy, which is kind of like a fun character, but he's good. He could. It's nice that he has a happy ending about being the boss. So he runs everything, where I think everyone else could go forward, go to a new ecosystem or environment, and maybe the next thing is like, okay, wait, now we went to a very, very established economy. Now let's go to like a third world country that doesn't have very much profit economy or whatever, and it's literally the idea of building an economy from nothing and the pains of having to build an economy in a system that is povertous, that doesn't have any money or any understanding of maybe some level of education, and the problems that could exist in. I think that's where the future of the show could go. Also, it's a manga, so there probably is a guaranteed reason or way that the show gets executed. So if you do know that, please tell me. But I think that would be a fun way for the show to continue. And maybe that would give more reason to, wait, no, the show is literally how to build a business, like the story. Build a business, 0 to 100, do that. Maybe use the previously established business to kind of feed the beginning business so that it can rise, so that everything can go up. Maybe, I don't know. But if that is the case, then actually I don't mind. I think partially my problem was the beginning of the show is very much you going through like the beginner phase of how to advance through a company, how to attack problems from a different perspective. Shows you the prospect of overworking your employees, which essentially is that now they're like, just because you ask for more people, if you ask for more effort in a week span, that could cripple your month's production because they're burned out from that week of being used. Which is an interesting idea. So yeah, I think I think what this whole show does, if I really think about it again, I think it maps out the constant business practices that exist within all of it, which is interesting. I still think it moves too quickly. I still think I would have liked the show to have like maybe in 2 seasons, that's when he finally gets to the top, because it does seem like it kind of progresses. But with that being said, if that is the idea of the show, is trying to show you economic business, value creation kind of things, and eventually culminating in success. I'm pretty down with that. So it shows you so in the next season, if it shows you building a company in like a very impoverished community, country, or whatever, it's showing you the beginning parts of that, and then eventually it's like, no. At the end, at a certain point, the things kind of just run themselves. As long as people don't shit the bed, it'll just keep flourishing upwards, and you'll be good to go. Maybe we could throw some curveballs that we've seen from other businesses that had to kind of straddle the line and try to survive, and then they eventually succeed, and that whole business gets created. Maybe that's the tack that they're going for, is just to show business practices, essentially. That could be fun then. I think if I go into it with that perception, and if you go into it with that perception, you might enjoy it quite a lot. Again, the characters are fun. The main character is goofy. It's a comedy, kind of businessy / fantasy, weird isekai, but not an isekai, but kind of an isekai, because there are moments of grandeur and fantasy. It's a complicated show. It's a lot, but it's not bad. But I don't know if I would suggest it to everybody, because it is a show that I think, at a baseline, it's just a comedy show. It's an isekai that feels at times like it is really weighted in the way that it makes it feel like the main character is written to be unstoppable and not realistic almost, and not like practical almost. But in the other sense, if you do like things that I've mentioned, like the business proposition aspect of the show, and like kind of just looking at things within our economy and how that kind of plays into itself, and taking the analogy of like fantasy, a dungeon, and corporations, and kind of using that to represent a lot of the things that we experience in our daily life outside of the mystical aspect, that's pretty prevalent. And also it makes it kind of interesting by adding like powers and heroes and demons and monsters and perception of monsters, and how they can actually be more valuable if you do XYZ, and also making it so that monsters are looked at as like a really good working force, and not like as monsters, and kind of making the people in the dungeons want to work for this black company, because it sees them not as monsters, and how that can be kind of endearing and cute. Again, I wish it played with more ideas and gave time to play with those ideas, but it kind of feels like it moves a little fast. But I do think if you enjoyed any of the things I mentioned, you probably get a kick out of this show. It looks great. Animation is fun. Characters are cute and enjoyable. I think you'll like it. If you like the business aspect of things and you like isekais, I think you'll like it a lot. Also, it is a 0 to hero, although he already was. It's like 0 to hero if your best friend was a hero already, or a god, and he was just kind of hanging out with you, coaching you to get to 100% boss god level 2. Anywho, thank you so much for listening to me talk about anime. Appreciate you. I don't deserve you, but I appreciate you giving me this out. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about it. If you have seen it, let me know what the manga does. Is that correct? Did they run out of time? Did they want to kind of show you the entire anime manga in one season, just because they were like, I'm probably not going to get a season 2, let's tell the full story? Or is it literally just like, no, it's written in this way because it's supposed to show you like business practices in an interesting way, aka in a fantasy way? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, but let me know. I know a lot of y'all read the manga. I am a filthy, no time having anime watcher. So, yes. Anyways, thank you so much for your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We do talk about anime a lot on the channel whenever I watch one. It takes a little bit of time to get through, but I usually talk to you guys about it, and I would love to hear what you guys think about it as well. Yes, let me know, and thank you. And also, if you engage with the video at all, love you, and we stream a lot.